Parables of the Messiah, number 57, the Talents. Matthew 25, verse 14 to 30. There is an obvious resemblance between the parables of the talents and the pounds, Luke 19, verse 12 to 27, with some equally obvious differences. Regarding them as one parable, the efforts of some writers to determine which is the original form of the parable, and why one gospel writer varied the story and inserted it in a different place in the order of Christ's ministry, are marked more by ingenuity than faith in the gospel writers. On the face of it, it is practically certain that Jesus, going from place to place, would repeat and also vary his stories as occasion demanded. The needs of one village were not different from the needs of another. To all the gospel of the kingdom was preached, and while we should not expect a stereotyped form of words, the message would be essentially the same as it was given throughout the land. When circumstances called for it, the teacher was able to adapt his message. Why he did so calls for investigation, but patient study is well rewarded. The skeptical, critical approach of many writers disables them from seeing reasons for the variations we find in the Gospels. The attitude of a detective determined to find evidence in support of an hypothesis does not lead to open-minded examination. The parable of the talents was spoken some weeks after the parable of the pounds. In the context in Matthew, the parable of the talents was evidently designed to instruct concerning faithfulness in Christ's stewards. "Who is the faithful and wise steward?" he had asked. And reversing the order in his answers, he first illustrated the quality of wisdom in the 10 virgins parable, and then turns to the other quality, and shows in the parable of the talents who are the good and faithful servants. At the time Jesus spoke, none of his hearers would see the full significance of a man travelling into a far country. A few days later he told the apostles very plainly, but without comprehension on their part, "I go away." The parable, like many other of his sayings, comes within the purpose indicated by his words. "And now I have told you before it came to pass that, when it is come to pass, ye might believe." John 14, verse 29. The course of events, death, resurrection, and ascension, were all clear to him, and he patiently continued his teaching as a sower scatters his seed, knowing that the harvest will come in its own time. To the servants he delivered his goods, a fact sometimes overlooked. The form in which he gave his goods was in money, in talents, worth roughly about £250 each. Not all received the same amount as in the pounds, but to every man according to his several ability the master distributed his wealth. One had 5, another 2, and a third 1 talent. We think of talents in modern speech as the natural gifts with which a person is endowed. A man may be a talented musician or artist or craftsman, and we regard these qualities as essentially his. But what has a man that he has not received? He may use his native gifts and develop them and become proud of his achievements. But when a man becomes a servant of the Lord, he then recognizes that he has received good at the hand of God. Job 2, verse 10. We may generally regard the opportunities for any kind of service as talents entrusted to us. The opportunities may come from the possession of money, of leisure time, or of some particular ability. In a special sense, the ascended Lord gave gifts to men, Ephesians 4 verse 8, in the organization of the first-century ecclesias, when diversities of gifts, ministries, operations, given to every man to profit withal, were divided to every man severally as he will. 1 Corinthians 12 verse 4 to 11. Even in these circumstances there was some sort of illustration of the spirit shown by the one-talent man, in that some grumbled and envied because others possessed gifts which they coveted. Paul explained that in the body, hand and foot, eye and ear, all played their parts for the good of the whole. In the same way there is room for 5 and 1 talent servants in the Lord's household. 2 of the servants applied themselves to the duty of trading with their talents with equal relative success. The man with 5 talents and the man with 2 each doubled the amounts entrusted to them. Both had used their abilities to the utmost. The approbation in each case was the same. "Well done, good and faithful servant. Thou hast been faithful over a few things, I will make thee ruler over many things. Enter thou into the joy of thy Lord." Verse 21 and 23. The 1-talent man hid his talent. He did not steal it or use it for his own advantage, but simply let it remain idle. He gave his reason, shamelessly and boldly. "Lord, I knew thee that thou art an hard man, reaping where thou hast not sown, and gathering where thou hast not strawed. And I was afraid, and went and hid thy talent in the earth. Lo, there thou hast that is thine." Verse 24 and 25. The choice of the less endowed servant for his graceless role raises the question whether there is a greater liability for a man not naturally gifted to feel that he cannot do much, and to do nothing at all. That the servant was mistaken is evident. The Lord was just. He had only given him responsibility according to his ability, and had a right to expect service to the limit of a man's power. The man expressed fear of his master. "I was afraid." This was unjust on his part, for the master was generous, rewarding good service with a share in his own joy. The servant's faulty views of his master affected the service he gave. Although his estimate of his master was wrong, the man nevertheless was judged on the basis upon which he had governed his own life. If he thought of his master as he said, then he should have used his master's wealth in keeping with that view, and have given to the bankers his talent, so that the Lord could have had increment. The man was loquacious. Faithful men have fewer words. Instead of self-examination, he unjustly accused his Lord, and proved himself an unworthy servant. It is possible for people of real but small talent to excuse their failure to use what ability they possess by a rationalizing process of thought. They complain they're neglected. True worth always is. They're not valued aright. Others get praise which is not due to them. This spirit of discontent handicaps them, when resolution and application would yield valuable results. The attitude adopted is, "What should I do?" Whether it be a cutting off of hand or some duty in connection with the gospel. Anyone so disposed should remember that it was not success that was commended, but faithfulness. Men are not equal in ability, but all can use what ability they have to the utmost. "Be not weary in well-doing" is an apostolic counsel that applies equally to all. In his message to the 7 churches, the same Lord who spoke the parable exhorted his servants, "Be watchful and strengthen the things that remain. I know thy works, and service, and faith." The same qualities are encouraged in these letters as in the parable. The reward bestowed is rulership over many things, and a sharing in the joy of the Lord. The Lord knew the help to endurance that contemplation of future good can be. For the joy set before him, he endured the cross. Hebrews 12, verse 2. Fullness of joy forevermore. A joy that brings to the immortal association with the Almighty is now his. Psalm 16, verse 11. It is written of him, "The king shall joy in thy strength, O Lord, and in thy salvation how greatly shall he rejoice." Psalm 21, verse 1. This joy in possession of divine strength and kingship is now Christ's. That which is his in the day of his return will be shared by his brethren. Revelation 2, verse 7, 17 and 26, chapter 3, verse 5, 12 and 21. But this should be noticed. The future is the continuation and fruit of present effort. The faithful servant found joy in service and in the wise use of things entrusted to him, powers which are used to develop. The present is the training for the future, and without present development and exercise in Christ's service, qualifications for the future would be absent. The converse of this is true. Neglected powers atrophy and perish, both in the realm of body and mind. It is also true on the spiritual plane. In keeping with this, therefore, the unused talent was taken away. It was not given to the servant for him merely to look after it, but to use it, and failure to use it was a failure of trust. The man therefore was unworthy and unfit for further service. Proved wanting in small things, he could not be given greater. Is there not finally a cause for his attitude in his view of God? "I was afraid," is his own confession. His character, his life, was determined by the way he thought of God. How could such a man find pleasure in the company of the Almighty? His spirit makes him a stranger. His place is in the dark outside. "He that overcometh shall inherit all things, and I will be his God, and he shall be my son." But the fearful and unbelieving, and all liars, shall have their part in the lake which burneth with fire and brimstone, which is the second death. Blessed are they that do his commandments, that they may have right to the tree of life, and may enter in through the gates into the city. For without are dogs, and sorcerers, and whoremongers, and murderers, and idolaters, and whosoever loveth and maketh a lie. Revelation 21, verse 7 and 8, 22, verse 14 and 15.